panel to introduce themselves and where they're from. And Sevi, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. Really nice to be here with you today. So my name is Sevi Marshall, and I'm a digital project manager at a digital creative agency called Candour. You might be able to see the backward sign behind me. We didn't really think of that when we were putting it up. There was look backwards to everyone else. So what I do day to day is I oversee the delivery, the design, build, conceptualization, everything of websites. So I work a lot with digital designers, with programmers, anyone who's kind of completing quality assurance, directors, and everyone else within the agency that has any involvement with things like search engine optimization to build just the best websites possible and to make sure that they meet the expectations of our clients. I actually came into this role only about 18 months ago, so I'm relatively new to tech and completely understand what it's like to have imposter syndrome, and hopefully I can pass on some of my knowledge and tips as well, just to kind of show you that it's not as scary as everyone thinks. It's actually really welcoming and an amazing space to be in.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you once again for being a part of this talk. Phil, over to yourself.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm also delighted to be here. My name's Phil Hawksworth. I'm based in the UK. I'm in St Albans, just north of London, and I work in a company called Netlify, who do web hosting, web development workflows and infrastructure. Intention is to make it easy to get projects live and out into the web and kind of support developers with those workflows that you need for that. I've been there for about 6 years, but before then, I kind of think of myself as a front-end engineer, but secretly I don't write much code that goes to production, and the word much there is not necessary. I don't write any code that goes to production, but over the years I've done that in various places. I've worked for product companies, I've worked at agencies, and so very much understand the value of good project managers and producers to get things over the line and make projects happen at all. So now I get to play with the toys that Netlify is building, try and understand how they would excite me as a developer, and let the web developers out in the world know about those, and also feedback to Netlify, where are the gaps? What are the pain points that developers have that if only we could solve those would make life a little bit better. So I do a lot of talking about the things that we make, and also I'm quite opinionated about what I think is a good way to build for the web as well, which has led me to feel like an outsider in a few conversations that might come up along the way as we talk about.
It's a very opinionated space, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. There's 5 of us on this call, and I bet there are more than 5 opinions.
Thank you so much, Phil, and thank you for the great introduction. Nathaniel.
Hey folks, my name is Nathaniel. I'm a developer evangelist. So I'm actually very similar to Phil in terms of I don't write production code. My job, I work for a company called Twilio, which is cloud communications APIs. And my job is to educate other developers on how to use our tools. So oftentimes I think of myself as helping be the walk through for someone from like, oh, I finally heard about you and what you do, all the way to, okay, I've built my first prototype and now I'm beginning to think about best practices to take it to production. So helping people get started. Really, it's just an excuse because I love to write code and I love to talk. My friends call me chatbots coder, and it's the perfect job for that. So that's what I kind of do day to day. It looks very, very different, but usually I'm writing demos, performing demos, doing workshops, making videos or blog posts and stuff to teach other people how to use our developer tools.
Amazing, thank you so much. And I'm going to drop in one of our own, because Leanna is a graduate of the Tech Educators Bootcamp. So sorry, Leanna, I'm doing your intro for you. Over to Leanna, one of our own.
Yes, I was one of the first graduates of Tech Educators, which feels like years ago now, but it really wasn't. It was like a year ago. It's crazy how many students you've got now. But so I work for Aviva. You've all probably heard of Aviva, especially in Norwich. They kind of take over a little bit. But I'm a front-end developer for Aviva. So I have been managing a system that all the claim handlers use, and it gives them instructions. So daily I have about 500 claim handlers using the system that I maintain and build, which is you know, can be a bit intense. So imposter syndrome is definitely something I've experienced, especially going straight from boot camp. So I was hired at Aviva before I'd even finished the boot camp, so that was quite big. And then I actually ended up maintaining the system on my own, so I wasn't in a team of devs. And then over the past couple of days, I've actually moved teams to the analytics and AI team in Aviva. So I'm now doing the front end development for all of their apps. And I have a deadline for the 17th, and I've not even had all my software installed yet. So you can imagine my imposter syndrome is super high at the moment. But yeah, I think I've experienced a lot of what you're all probably going through, especially with being on the boot camp. So I hope I can give my input today. So yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you as well for sharing that. And yeah, congratulations on the new role, hey.
Thank you.
I mean, I guess where to start with imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is something that I'm really proud that we can talk about in the industry, because it's definitely something that does affect more people in our industry than maybe even realise. And for me, what I'd really like to understand from the panel, and Sevi, I don't know if we can start yourself, is how have you either seen imposter syndrome affect you or affect someone that you know within your team or teams that you've worked with? Because I think, sorry, just to expand on that, is sometimes we don't even realize that imposter syndrome is happening and it's something that we're going through. So what's your take on that?
I actually didn't realize I had imposter syndrome until one of my closest friends turned around to me and said that when you first started working in the tech space, you had really bad imposter syndrome. And I went, oh, that's the name for it. That's how I felt. That's great. Thank you for that. To be honest with you, the way that I saw it day to day was in just feeling very scared to ask questions. I was really curious. I wanted to know so much information, and there was a lot of information coming at me, especially by being a newbie to, web design and web development. There's a lot of jargon that's kind of thrown around, and everyone seems to be in their own little bubble. But the way that I felt a lack of confidence in that is just by being really scared to ask questions, because I thought that everyone knew what they were talking about. I thought I'd come across as really stupid and everyone would just turn around and laugh at me. I'm sure no one would actually be that cruel, but that was one of my worst fears. So I think just that lack of confidence and actually putting up my hand and saying, I don't know what I'm doing and I feel like I'm going to do a bad job if I carry on like this, was the biggest way that I saw imposter syndrome perpetuate in me.
No, great answer. And I think getting to the point where people can ask questions is probably something we're going to talk about in a minute on solutions to that. But yeah, it takes a lot, doesn't it, when you're sat in that meeting and someone uses a 3-letter acronym, which is we do everywhere, right? And to go, and put your hand up and go, I'm sorry, what do you mean?
What does that mean?
and the point is, and we always say it in classes as well, it's like, if you're thinking it, there's probably 2 other people in the room that are wondering it as well. So yeah, Phil, over to yourself as well. How have you either experienced it or seen it in colleagues? I know obviously you talked earlier about managing teams.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you hit the nail on the head with the 3-letter acronym, or TLAs, as I prefer to call them, to try and keep them. They're so rife in our industry, and they just get used. They just kind of get absorbed into the common parlance, so it can become very intimidating, can become a bit impregnable. So yeah, it's already been mentioned that asking questions is so vital. In fact, I think that's one of the key skills throughout our careers, not just from when you're early in your career, but later in your career as well. I think always being willing to ask questions, and also by doing that, demonstrating to others that that's fine, I think is really important. But in terms of how I've seen this or experienced this in my own environments, I often find that the loudest voice wins, when there are teams working together. And sometimes the person with the most confidence in conversations isn't always the person with the best answer or the most up-to-date wisdom. It's just that they often bluster their way through and are happy to kind of take the lead. And I think I've worked in many environments where I felt like I might have a different perspective, but I thought, Now, everyone's so absorbed in and so bought into this way of thinking that I must be, what don't I understand? And so I've kept my mouth shut. And I think lots of other people do that as well. I think it's very easy just for the dominant person to be assumed to be correct. And when I say dominant, I usually mean loud and confident. And it's a really valuable thing to be able to become confident in that way and have confidence in yourself. But it's one of those things that it's difficult because it's almost, is it a zero-sum game? Is there only so much energy and oxygen around in a conversation to share? I think finding a way to share that appropriately is really important to let other people in, which is probably a good note for me to take a breath and let some other people in. But yeah, that's definitely how I've experienced it in my work.
And Nathaniel, is it something that you've experienced in your career or seen in others?
Absolutely. I think when I think of imposter syndrome, especially when people talk about maybe defeating it or overcoming it, in my mind, it kind of comes in waves. Especially that every time I've maybe like had an opportunity to have new responsibilities that stretch me, then it's like up, and then I slowly maybe feel more comfortable. I learn, I get some validation, and I'm like, cool, now I know it. And then I get another set of responsibilities, and it pulses. And especially just in tech, when there's so many different things that you need to know and you need to stay on top of, and they're moving so fast. And oftentimes maybe people look to you as the expert on everything at every point in time. It comes and goes. And I think and one thing I like is that you said that in the question you were talking about how it takes many different forms as well. I think so many different people, they have that similar feeling, but they react to it, or the way it affects them is different as well. But I think acknowledging that it's there is the first step to being able to find ways to work around it, or even use it as a superpower to your advantage.
Agreed. And it's true, it does affect people in different ways. And that's the thing about it. I think that's why talking about it is always so important, because it's your manifestation of it is acceptable. It's like your manifestation of how it affects you and your situation is okay, but understanding it and talking about it to other people is how you can start to overcome it. Leanna, obviously a lot of our students are looking for that first role. And that's probably where we talk about peaks and troughs. Nathaniel, which you're just saying at the moment, coming out of a boot camp, which something is super structured, or coming out of any learning experience, whether it's university, school, college, or a boot camp, and going in, I imagine that's the point where you're kind of like, whoa, it's absolutely peaking. And how did you find it going from a boot camp, from a learning environment, and into that? Was it something that you felt going into a role?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it was super high for me. I think it's quite funny because when I got the job, I felt incredible and I was so proud of myself. And then I was like, oh wait, now I actually have to do the job. Like I was like, oh no, they've hired a fraud. And yeah, I just felt really, especially not having that support group. I think really use that support group that you have, and obviously you have your mentors as well. Please use your mentors. They're there for you. They've all experienced this too. And I think for me, my imposter syndrome I had my entire life, so it wasn't just when I started in the tech industry. And I think it developed from a bad learning experience at school when I was younger, often told, don't put your hand up too much, or you need to put your hand up more, or being in bottom sets. I was in bottom sets for pretty much everything at school, and I was kind of labeled as a certain intelligence or a certain capability. And then I got to tech ed, and they have this growth mindset where you can learn anything and you can do anything, and no one had ever told me that before, that I can do anything. And yeah, it might take me a little bit longer than other people, and yeah, some people might come across a bit like egotistical with their skills or that sort of thing. So I think use your support network, and what we were talking about earlier with the asking questions, joining a new company. At Aviva, there are ridiculous amounts of acronyms, and at first I was like, oh, I know what that means. I'm not going to put my hand up because I know what that means. And no, it means something completely different to what you think it means. So, and my boss said to me, I'd rather you ask questions. I'd rather you know what we're talking about than feel like, you can't ask. And I would put my hand up and they'd be like, oh my God, someone would come up and go, I was thinking the same thing. I'm so glad you asked that, because I had no idea what they were talking about. So it's going to help you, and that's what's important. But yeah, my biggest tip is use your support network.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that as well. The interesting thing is we talk about imposter syndrome and we all talk about it and we all sort of are aware that it's something that definitely affects people. In fact, YouGov did a recent poll that said 60% of the UK at some point in their career have experienced imposter syndrome. So that's, numbers isn't my strong point, but that's definitely more than half. So it's a real and tangible thing. But the thing that's always really struck me in the tech industry is I find that it feels more prevalent. And I guess my question is, why do you think that is? And Phil, I know this is a question that you're interested in answering.
Yeah, I mean, I think one aspect we've mentioned very briefly already, and that's how kind of thick with acronyms and kind of unintuitive naming the industry is. I think that's one aspect. But I think another aspect is the way that we learn about things very often now is through people who are publicly explaining stuff. Nathaniel and I both work in similar kind of part of the industry where people are learning and then teaching and then building a profile in doing that. And there can be a mistake, I think, in equating exposure and profile with definitive expertise. And so it can be quite intimidating when someone who's got a ton of followers or has done a load of talk says, this is how it is. This is the thing that I've just learned. As someone who gives conference talks myself, very often I've just learned the thing I've talked about. Sometimes I'm excited to share it because it's something I've discovered. I'm learning something new all the time, and I think it's important to recognize that this industry is evolving, technologies are evolving. Frankly, we're all still learning it all the time. Otherwise, we'd complete it, we'd be done. And I think the fact that some people get a great deal of profile and get seen as the arbiters of the truth can become quite intimidating for others. And I think that's something that is difficult to overcome.
Amazing answer. And yeah, that's the great thing about when I think we're learning here is you can see that there are lots of different ways to do things. And it's almost like just because the way that you're told here is one way doesn't mean that has to be the right way. But when you're placed in a position, exactly what you said, whether that's out in talks or with a senior and a senior saying to you, it must be done this way, you sort of take a knock in confidence, even if your code works. It's like the old meme, isn't it? Where it's like, that's the worst running code I've ever seen. And it's like, well, it still runs. And it's like, there's a lot of ways it can work. Sevi, your experience, why do you think it's so prevalent in tech, the imposter syndrome phenomenon, I guess?
I think it's mainly for two reasons. So the first one is because we're surrounded by so many people, like Phil said, and you made a really great point there, who kind of prove themselves to be experts. And I think we're so used to thinking of our peers, someone who's had more experience in the industry on a particular skill set, and being an expert in the industry. But you really have to move away from that mindset in tech. And a good way to think about it is to just take a step back and contextualize it. Tech itself as an industry, is about 100 years old. If you think about something like agriculture, it's tens of thousands of years old. If you think about all the knowledge and understanding that was accumulated in the first 100 years of agriculture as an industry, it'll kind of help you understand that actually we're only just really scratching the surface of all the knowledge and theories and things that we're going to discover in the future within the tech world. So realistically, no one is an expert. No one is actually someone who knows 100% of everything that there is to know out there in tech, because we're discovering so much information every single day, and there is still so much for people to learn, whether they've been in the industry for 40 years or 18 months like myself.
And I think something that's come through in both of these answers here, an incredible answer, by the way, thank you for that. Something that's definitely coming through is there are no experts. Like, there are people who can talk about a subject, but there are no experts. So if you're feeling to yourself, I'm not an expert in this, guess what? No one else is either. So it's a completely natural feeling in that. in our boot camps, and I feel this is something we talked about in our conversation earlier about the concept of having to understand syntax. Students really feel like if they can't off the top of their head remember the syntax right now, that they've done it wrong, or that something's wrong, because if I've just learned JavaScript, I should know every piece of syntax from JavaScript that I've just done. It is impossible. And we talk about Googling the answer being okay and perfectly acceptable. At what point do you think you come to terms in your career to say, okay, I now am comfortable enough to know I cannot know everything? Because I think that when you start off, you think you really should. Nathaniel, I don't know what your take on that is.
No, I totally agree with the fact that there is a point at which you will know enough to Google the rest. I will never forget being at university and people always ask me like, how good was university? I was like, university was great, but honestly, it was like the first year and a half taught me what I needed to know to Google to get through the rest of university. And I think it's same for like boot camps, whatever like learning thing. There is too much knowledge. One of the best things about tech is that you get to build on the shoulders of giants. Sometimes, though, you're not aware of which shoulders giants you happen to be standing on. And especially, and this is something which I think is just going to keep on happening more and more, is that, for example, me, I've been a developer. I've been working professionally in tech for like 5 years, right? And oftentimes when I go to conferences, I meet people who were working in tech when JavaScript was invented. And they sometimes will be talking about their experiences and be like, oh, remember when we had this and then we had this other thing to solve the problem? I was like, I didn't even realize that was a problem, because by the time I started learning to code, the problem was already solved. Is that you will never actually have a complete understanding of every single thing at any one point. And even in your massive encyclopedia of knowledge, only a subsection of that will be constantly relevant to what you're doing day to day. And sometimes you're going to need to go outside of that. And Google is a tool. It's like having a library. It's like having somewhere where you can go and search. It's just easier because it's powered by like technology and all of the other things. But really just understanding that this is a tool, and then understanding that like being a great programmer is more about a mindset and approach mentally to solving problems, and then going and finding the tool. And Google is one of the ways you can find the right tool, find the right syntax to solve it. Oftentimes, if I'm jumping in to quickly write a tutorial in a language I'm not familiar with, I'm like, I know I need to use a for loop, or I need to use this kind of algorithm that I've written many times before, but how do I do it in this syntax? It's not the actual writing code that makes you a programmer, it's understanding and breaking down that problem into its core concepts and then finding the solutions to go fix it. So you're always going to do it. Just liberate yourself now.
Phil, you've got a point for it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, nodding along very aggressively. But just this notion of it doesn't need to be a memory test. As Nathaniel says, I think one of the best skills is just knowing how to interpret and make use of the answer that you get by searching for it. Because it's one thing to be comfortable like saying, okay, well, I can't remember this, so I'll Google it or I'll look it up this, here, there, or anywhere. But it's knowing how to interpret the answer you get and what to trust and what to learn from it. I think it's super important that it doesn't need to be thought of as a memory test. And I think anyone who's written blog posts about something that they've learned and thought, oh, this is an interesting thing to share, has probably had this experience where later in life they've thought, how do I solve this? And they Google it and they find the perfect article. And Nathaniel's nodding along because he's found his own article that he wrote a few years before. It's a common thing. So, it's memory isn't the key thing. It's understanding and how to interpret stuff.
Amazing. And that anecdote of Googling and finding your own
Too common.
Wow. Leanna, again, someone coming new into the industry, into through the boot camp. Do you come to the terms with the fact that you can't know it all, or are you still thinking at the moment like I should know it all?
I mean, moving into a new role within the past 2 days, and having this big project that I have to finish, that I've had to be very upfront and honest with my boss, and I think just say, look, this is the stage that I'm at. And at first I was quite scared to say I don't know how to do this, because everyone on the team seems so you know, intelligent and good at what they do, and I see them coding away and I'm like, oh gosh, do I fit in? And then we had a meeting yesterday and I was just like, look, I need to be honest with you, I've never done C# before. I've never used this, I've never used that. And they were like, oh, none of us had used this before we started, none of us know how to do this, we Google everything, blah blah. And it just made me feel so much more at ease, because you feel out of place, but really you're all in the same place, if that makes sense. You're all on the same level. And I don't think I can't say I'll ever feel fully comfortable with it, because I think it's kind of, as human beings, it's kind of drilled into us that we're always trying to be the best. And, a lot of us are quite competitive. But yeah, I think as a woman, I think it's really important to realize that, you're not competing with the men in the room to be the best. You are bringing something to the table as a woman. You're bringing a different perspective. And I think it's important to just remember everyone's in, the same place. So
Definitely, and that's something that is, when we, sorry to go off on a bit of a tangent, but when we talk about diversity in tech and what people bring, it's like everyone has a place. When we talk about neurodiversity, socioeconomic diversity, gender diversity, it's true. The great thing is there are things that we might not know, but there's also things and superpowers that we bring to a team as well. And it's so easy, isn't it, to focus on what I don't know, but never focus on what we do bring.
mm-hmm.
And I think if we can actually look internally and start thinking to ourselves, do you know what? Like I might not be the best at this part of whatever the constructor or the forwarding, whatever it is in tech that you're trying to do, but actually maybe take a bit of time to be kind to ourselves and think, but these are the superpowers that I am bringing, and really try and focus on those. I know that's a mindset shift, and something difficult. I know it's a bit of a tangent, but I just thought I really wanted to pick up and pull out that point of, focus on what your superpowers are and be kinder to yourself, I guess, as well, in a lot of times. There was a question very similar to this, actually, that I had on the panel, but we've had it from a question in chat. Is this something we ever actually defeat? Do we ever, and I think we've kind of alluded to this time and time again, or is it something we learn to spot, maybe even anticipate, and then manage? Nathaniel, I'm going to ask you this question first, because you talked about this peak and troughs. And it's something that when we talk about and we run the bootcamp sessions, what we do is we actually say to people is, week one, you're going to be flying because you're doing HTML and CSS, and it clicks really easy. Then you're going to get to JavaScript for the first week in week 3, and you're going to be like, I thought I knew everything. What has happened? Who built this? Were they drunk? Like, what's going on? And then after week 6, 7, you're like, I get it. And then we throw React, and all of a sudden you go back to that phase. Do you think you ever get used to it, or do you think you just get used to managing it?
I think you can learn or acquire skills to help you manage it, to help you in some ways actually use it to challenge yourself. Because I remember someone once said, like, when you're experiencing imposter syndrome, see it as a great thing, because that means you're in a place where you're feeling challenged. You're feeling like, I want to even like grow better. And so it's like that is a great thing. So kind of embracing that, and then also finding ways to address it. So for example, me, what I do is anytime I'm taking on responsibilities or things that I'm beginning to feel are stretching me, I specifically go and look for mentors who I see have done things in like who have accomplished or maybe are more comfortable in that area, and then I ask them for practical advice on what they do, and while it doesn't necessarily just completely make the feeling go away, I feel reassured that I am taking positive steps to grow into the role. And then also understanding it as it's not necessarily a negative. I think oftentimes we can think of imposter syndrome as just something that is kind of very depressing or very sad, and something that is just a totally negative. And don't get me wrong, I think when you let it consume you, it can be. But I think understanding that this is your brain going like, we need to find ways to kind of make sure we know and we're sure of what we know at this level, and finding maybe other ways to have accomplishments that exist outside of just yourself, and also outside of other people's just opinions as well. So maybe your accomplishment, for example, my accomplishment sometimes is like, I want to give a talk at a meetup. I don't care about like how many people liked it. Remember the first one was like, I want to give a talk at a meetup. Okay, all right, now I want to give a talk at a meetup that's like not in London. Kind of, so more concrete things that exist outside of people's opinions. And then last one, I would say, is finding trusted. I read it in a book, and it was called Trusted Competitors. But these are other people in the industry who probably do similar things to you. So you're kind of all competitors in the same space, but you trust them, and you can actually go to them and say, what are the things I need to get better at? What are the things that I need to improve? Because having someone that you trust, who you know wants you to like grow and be the best version of yourself, tell you, oh, this is where you are, rather than you having imposter syndrome and trying to make up what may not necessarily be your weaknesses, can also help you actually focus in on those. So those are some of the things that I do. I think like everyone has slightly different things that they do, but maybe that works for you.
Awesome, thank you. And Sevi, any sort of anything that you think really, you know, recognizing those signs, working through those signs, what would you recommend?
In terms of working through imposter syndrome.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I think I like your points, Nathaniel, in terms of setting those kind of concrete goalposts for yourself, and just giving yourself a few markers and saying, you know, every few weeks I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing that. But I think, to be honest with you, the best thing for me was just to lean into the curiosity. I've always really enjoyed reading and watching YouTube videos, and I know that that's the sort of media that suits me. So what I would tend to do is, if I was curious about, you know, programming, for example, because to me, I started off very much from a blank slate, and I wanted to get to a point where I was starting to understand the problems the developers were going through, because that is absolutely crucial to my role. I would go on YouTube and I would just watch videos of developers ranting about stuff, because sometimes that was the best way for me to learn, you know, what are the issues, where are the problems, and what are the frustrations. Sometimes watching, you know, developers or overhearing developers ranting about project managers, again, kind of ticking that box off and going, this is where the problems are for me. So I think the most suitable way for me to, you know, overcome imposter syndrome, and please don't get me wrong, I still have a little bit of it, is to actually lean into, you know, the curiosity I have about the things that relate to my job or the things that I enjoy, and then finding like the videos, the books, the magazines that are related to my role, and just like reading more about them. And finally, if I'm looking at someone who I think is an expert, or someone who really knows the field well, and they practice a certain skill, I'll go and try and learn it for myself. So in my example, it was developers. I was really scared of developers for a long time, because they understood JavaScript. And to me, it was an absolute nightmare. But, you know, in order for me to stop being so scared of asking them questions, or actually going, you know, why did you do that, or trying to understand where they were coming from, I just, you know, just tried a bit of learning coding myself, and just sat in front of a computer for a few nights a week and just tried it out, and spoke to developers and just said to them, could you please just simplify it for me? So I think that's really worked for me, and I think that's another really active way that you could, you know, approach this massive fear of imposter syndrome.
Incredible answer, and thank you for that one. This is one that I'm going to ask everyone, because it's something that I think is so important. And again, this is our experience of people come and learn to code and be absolutely incredible, you know, future developers. You can just see the passion, the drive, and how they've progressed through the 12 weeks that they're with us. And they'll get to the 12th week and people will say, I just don't feel like I belong here still. And it's because maybe people have not come from a school background or an education background, or, you know, it becomes very real when you come out of being in a space which is very supportive and nurturing into, you know, what could be the scary outside world. I don't believe it's like that. And the question I'll follow up with is about how nurturing I think the tech industry is. But that's all me telling people that. Why do you think, or what would you say to someone who says, the tech industry isn't for me, I don't belong here. Sevi, I don't know if we could start with yourself.
I'm actually really passionate about this sort of topic because I think it absolutely is. Again, just flip the table just for a second and think, if working in the tech industry isn't for you, then how are we as an industry are able to create the products and services that suit you? I bet everyone that's listening and watching this is either using a laptop, some sort of digital product or service, or anything along those lines. So how are we able to create those things that you're able to access and use and understand without your thoughts and opinions going into the creation and development of those products? So to me, I genuinely don't think that anybody would be unwelcome in this space, and I think there is absolutely a spot for every single individual that may be watching this, and just thinking about it, because it is entirely down to you to make our products and services within the industry more accessible, interesting, and useful to the wider population, and that includes yourselves.
Incredible answer. You can tell that's one that you like. I'm ready
really
for this one.
this.
I'm ready for this one. Phil, again, same question. To anyone that's thinking, no, I can't get into tech. It's this whole. We talked earlier on the call we had earlier. It's like, it's only for these billionaire geniuses that like to buy social media companies and make them explode. What would you say to anyone saying it can't be for me? I can't get into tech.
Well, I mean, I think Sevi really hit the nail on the head that it's really a broad industry. It's not all about writing code, first of all. And yeah, the more Sevi was speaking there, the more I had flashbacks to bits of software that were written and created just by developers. And my goodness, they got a way to go. We've all used applications like that really expose the assumptions of just a very narrow point of view. So the broader the perspectives we can bring to the things, the better. And I think that extends also to, we were talking earlier on about how welcome opinions are in conversation and in discourse. And I really observed that the more inclusive a group is, the more diverse a group is, the better the quality of the discourse, the better the communication. And it almost kind of goes back to one of the questions at the very beginning about why do we think there is so much a feeling of imposter syndrome in this industry. I think is because we haven't really got very good diversity. It's improving, but we've got a long way to go. And I think there are still many teams that are quite singular. And it becomes very difficult then for opposing point of views to find a foothold in those conversations. So anywhere that there is greater inclusivity and greater diversity in the teams, I think I was going to say naturally, but not naturally. It still takes work, but I think it's a much more fertile ground for healthy conversations to take place. And that's kind of on all of us to create that in the first instance. But I'd also say that we're talking about two slightly different things sometimes as the same thing. I think we're talking about imposter syndrome and being out of our comfort zone. And they're almost the same thing, but I don't think they're quite the same thing, because I think it's really valuable to be a little bit outside your comfort zone. That's how your comfort zone expands. And, I think everyone on the call has talked about this and kind of learning these new skills and, progressing. I think imposter syndrome is beyond that. It's also a feeling of being out of your comfort zone, but also that you don't belong there, and you don't have a right to be there. And that, I think, is as much on the rest of us to address as it is for the individual. We have to kind of create an environment that is accepting of people's mistakes and the fact that they're learning things, and make it valuable and accepted to make those mistakes. We talk a lot about how we all learn a lot by making mistakes. Giving people the oxygen and the room to make those mistakes, and not for it to be a disaster, I think I'm answering a completely different question, but here we go. The word rant was used earlier on, and here's one. I think it's just it's something that we say that we do. We say that we learn a lot by our mistakes. So I think we need to give people the opportunity to make those mistakes without feeling like they've let everyone down, because teaching by sharing what we've learned, super valuable.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious of, I want to get through Nathaniel and Leanna, your view on this. I'm now opening it up as well to the viewers to ask any questions you may have of the panel as well. And whilst I'm getting those questions in, Nathaniel, what would you say to anyone that says, I don't belong in tech? What would your response to that be?
It's fun. It's funny actually, because as Phil was like talking, I was like, yeah, actually, maybe I am conflating like imposter syndrome and stretching your comfort zone. And I think one of those really important parts, which you just said, was about sense of belonging. Feeling like I don't belong here, and I think there is like, we are all trying to help ourselves. Like, everyone wants to make sure that we don't experience imposter syndrome. I also think like everyone, no matter how early you are in as part of the community, it's also part of our responsibility to try and mitigate other people feeling imposter syndrome, making other people feel that they belong. Even if you know the acronym, still being like, oh, the acronym is this, or asking even though you know the answer because you think there's a chance someone else might not know the answer, being ready to support those. And even if you're like just getting started and you feel like, I barely know anything, I could not cause someone else to feel like an imposter. Just making sure you carry that warmth from now all the way up. I will never forget one time meeting someone who really, really inspired me, and I went over. I was like, "Thank you so much. You've done so much. You don't understand how much you've inspired me." And the person was just like, "That feeling, pass it on." And I think there are people who you have felt have made you feel comfortable, like you belong. Take that feeling that they gave you and try and pass it on. And I think if enough of us kept on doing that, imposter syndrome would probably fade away, or people become more comfortable and feeling like they belong in the spaces that they enter. So I think that's the one thing I'm going to say now.
That was so good. Thank you so much for that. Incredible. Leanna, what would you say to, and thank you for the answer, by the way. Leanna, what would you say to anyone that feels that, no, can't get into tech, it's not an industry for me, because how could I possibly belong there?
It's interesting because before I worked in tech, I worked in retail for a while, and then I worked in customer service because I always thought, well, I'm friendly and I'm outgoing, so I should do this. And I never ever considered a career in tech ever until somebody said to me, you love tech, you love gaming, you love fixing problems. Have you ever considered this? And I couldn't figure out why. And I think it is the sense of like, you get some stereotypes and of the tech community and the people that should work in tech, or and you sort of think, oh well, you've got to be really clever and you've got to be really smart, or there's maths involved. That's the one thing. People always seem to think I'm incredible at maths. I'm like, oh no, definitely not. And I think that sense of not belonging is going to hold you back in literally everything, not just tech. And it's definitely something that you have to learn. But one thing I would say is, when I started coding, I loved it, I enjoyed it. But the thing that's made me want a career in tech even more is the community and the people that work in tech. And I think coming into the industry, I sort of looked around, like I was at a tech conference and I was kind of like, there's not really anybody that looks like me here, or has the same, necessarily experience. And I think in boot camps, you'll get that a lot as well. You'll find that a lot of people want you to have a degree, or expect you to have been doing this for years for you to be valid in the industry. But at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make the best product for for our audiences. And that's one thing that I think, coming into this new team, we all give each other feedback constantly. And one thing that I'm having to learn is how to take constructive feedback and how to work with the team in that way, and how to give feedback as well, not be afraid to be like, actually, I think maybe we should do it this way, or maybe we should do because we just all want to make the best product. But sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but yeah, honestly, you do belong. If you don't think you belong, you do. And I think that's a sign that you do. Like Nathaniel was saying, it shows that you want to challenge yourself, and it shows that you want to push yourself. And those are the people that we want in tech, because we just want to create the most awesome things.
Amazing answer, thank you. Yeah, I think the fact that you're even considering it considering a career in tech, considering coming into this industry, shows that you do belong, because already you're inquisitive, you're finding out about something new, and if you have the inquisitive mind, that's all it takes. Inquisitive mind and a passion to continue to learn. And if you have those two things, nothing else matters, because you will find your place, you will find your community, and you will find a nurturing and supporting environment. Because, Leanna, to your point, I've never worked in an industry where, Nathaniel, you alluded to earlier, I think what you said, find friendly competition that can give you feedback. It's like I don't see competition here. I only ever see people that are trying to do the best that they can do, build the best that they can be, and that's the amazing thing about the industry. From the outside, it might look scary. It might look like this closed network of super smart like hackers that can take down a government agency or something. On the inside, it's not that at all. Don't worry. So we're going to move over to some questions from the audience now, and we've got quite a few. So I'm sorry if I can't get through everyone's. What we can do is potentially take the ones that we can't get done and post them up on the website or something, and guide people to find them there. So what I'll do is I'll take the first two hands up from people. So think it's almost like a sharpshooter thing. Here you go. Ready? With technology, especially web development, moving so fast, what is your advice to handling the pressure of an expectation to be good at everything and be in touch with those latest trends? Oh, Nathaniel, straight in.
I just realized that it made me feel like I was like on a quiz. But what I meant to say was, what I was going to say is, one thing I remember like distinctly at university, and this could be in a boot camp. This is like it's not a university experience, but I just remember one day realizing, oh wait, I signed up to learn computer science, but within computer science, there's so many different verticals. Okay, today I'm deciding to become a JavaScript developer. Like I remember like making that choice to kind of narrow my focus on something. And one thing that we always experience in tech is there's so many different things in so many different verticals that are constantly new innovations are being made. And don't get me wrong, being aware of everything or having a knowledge that it's happening or some understanding is really, really good. But I've noticed that some of the best developers that I know are people who have found an expertise and really focused on developing it and staying on top of that. And the cool thing is then you get to limit the amount of stuff you need to keep up with. At the same time, having a kind of general awareness of what's going on is good, but then being an expert gets you hired and gets you hired quite well, rather than trying to stay on top of everything and then not being able to juggle all of those balls effectively.
Yeah, really good answer actually. I think that's we were talking about this earlier, Phil, on our call about how the idea of full stack, in boot camps, the good thing is you teach people front and back end. But really, that's the gateway drug to say to people. It's like, find your passion, find the area that's right for you, get an understanding of as much as it as you can, and then try and find the place of deep dive. The truth is, you can barely understand everything in a small vertical. There is no way you're going to be able to understand anything in 2-3 verticals. I'm sure there are some people out there that have next level understandings, but really trying to understand everything is impossible. Phil, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Mostly I just wanted to get some of the sweet bonus points that Nathaniel was getting for being buzzing in first. But no, I just had one tiny thing to add to that now I've forgotten because of my smart ass comment. Oh yes. I mean,
you don't get the points now then.
Yeah, no, the point revoked. Finding a niche is definitely really valuable, and as you say, it's hard to be an expert in everything. And I think the fact that there's always something else to learn. Personally, I think actually we can see that as a benefit, as a positive rather than just a challenge, because I think it's fun to work in an industry where you can learn more stuff and there is something else to discover later on. And so that's just one slight perspective that I put on that. But it can be really overwhelming. But also, kind of like the fact that there's an opportunity to keep learning new things, and we're kind of learning those often together. So yeah, that's just one tiny little perspective that I'd kind of add to the great answers already given.
Thank you for that. This is kind of refactoring, see what I did there? An answer that we had earlier, but I think it is very, very important for any employers listening, or people going into their first role, of what to look for. What's the one piece of advice you can give to companies in industry to foster a healthier environment to reduce imposter syndrome? What can companies do to welcome you in and make it so that you feel less Sevi? Wow, there you go. I'm noticing, yeah, like I'm gonna have to start doing this in the future. Having that fingers on trigger thing is like, oh, great.
No, it's getting all competitive now. I think one of the best things that companies can do is just open their doors up and actually let people from the outside take a look in. And one of the most common ways, or one of the most successful ways that we've done it as an agency, is by actually opening up work experience placements to students from sixth forms and high schools. Most recently, we had a student come in, and she had some knowledge of HTML and CSS, but she basically just gave HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to go and one was able to, build out a little landing page with a form that could submit through with information attached in the form into the back end of CMS by the end of the week, and it was so impressive. And if she was just learning that on her own or after school without the guidance of someone within the agency, or someone who was actually saying, yeah, this is correct, or if you have any questions, just let us know, we can help you out with that, it might have taken a lot longer, and she might have been a lot more daunted to enter that space and actually have those conversations that are needed in order to break down the barriers of imposter syndrome. So I would definitely urge companies to have a think about either having something like an open day, like schools do, for example, or just having some even like smaller work experience placements, or just getting people to come in and have a look around and see what happens within an agency or a tech department. I think that can be really useful.
Amazing, yeah, really good point. It's almost, and I think that's one of the biggest jobs that we have, is sort of demystifying this world, isn't it? Showing that, again, it comes back to what I said, you don't have to be a billionaire tech crazy person.
Yeah.
I don't know who's all those people, but actually, it's just normal people doing a job the same as any other job. It's just in tech. Leanna, you had a point to make on.
Yeah, I would say my advice for employers would probably be to talk to your employees and your colleagues, and just find out how they're doing, ask them questions about it. Are they experiencing imposter syndrome? And ask them how you can help them, because everybody's different, everybody has different ways of coping with it. So yeah, I would say just be really open and honest with your employees, and that comes for us as workers as well. Be honest with your boss. Don't be afraid to say, I'm struggling right now. And people, you'll be surprised how many people flock around you for support once you say you need help. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Definitely. And I think when you're going through that interview process as well, maybe a great question to ask a potential employer is to say, this is new for me. I don't know everything. What's the stages for me to be able to get support? And I think there's a two-way street with that from an employment point of view. Maybe list out, if I don't know the answer to something, I'm going to go away for 15 minutes. I'm going to try and find it. Then I'll do a bit of Googling. I'll try and do it. When I get to that point when I'm stuck, how are you going to support me? Because it puts the onus back on the employer, exactly as you said. And that will help you define and understand, is this a type of company that I want to work with? Am I going to get the support that I need? Because the truth is, anyone that's coming out of something like a boot camp or a university degree, or whatever your journey into tech is, you are going to need help. And those companies that support and nurture talent, they retain talent because of the fact that people feel comfortable and welcome in there. Phil, you had a point to make on that.
Yeah, I just couldn't agree with Leanna more about the importance of asking for help, and asking for help in a timely way. It's actually a bit of a cheat code and a bit of a superpower, being comfortable asking for help before it really is a problem. I've been guilty of this time and time again over my career, waiting until something is really a problem to ask for help because I didn't want to be seen to be failing. So as Leanna mentions, kind of creating an environment where it's seen as a positive thing and a constructive thing to ask for help, I think is really valuable. And if I may, I'd also say, I think when someone's joining a company, giving them a chance to have a small success quickly is also really valuable. I think there's lots of places where I've joined as part of a development team and been faced with this seemingly insurmountable pile of things to do before I can be productive. You know, I've got to set up an environment, I've got to understand the code base, I've got to know how to, you know, commit some code and actually get it to production, and it can feel really, really overwhelming before you can start doing, you know, your craft. One of the things I'm very proud of at Netlify is that, you know, it started off as everyone there when the company was very small was they understood the product because they were close to it and they touched it. But as the company got bigger and bigger, you have different roles there. There are people working in account management, there are people working in finance and what have you. And so it became, not everyone was very close to the product. And so we made it so that when someone joined the company, one of the things we try and get people to do is push a change to a website that we've got. And it's the most important website that we have at Netlify. It's called Pets of Netlify. And new employee, yeah, Nathaniel's fastest. So the new employees post a photo of they add a picture of their pet to a website, and they write a bit of code. And this started from someone who didn't write code at all. And they got the chance to then experience the platform and also have a feeling of, okay, I've deployed a thing. And I don't know, there's giving people a very small first step to feel like you're productive and you've had a win, I think can really open the floodgates to everything else that comes afterwards. So anyway, there's a bit of a tangent, but I think relevant nonetheless.
Nice. Thank you so much, and I think that is really, really invaluable. Giving people something, that they can, hang their hat on and say, yeah, I've done this, and then the next one will come, and the next one will come, and the next one will come, and that's how it snowballs. I'm afraid we have got some more questions. I will send them out as emails if that's okay, and get people's perspectives on those. Yeah. I wanted to say thank you from everyone here, from our schools and college partners that have joined as well. Hello to everyone, by the way. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much, Sevi, Phil, Nathaniel, and Leanna for making this an incredible panel. I really hope that it's very easy for us to say everyone gets imposter syndrome, and especially when we're teaching people, to hear it from experienced people out in the industry and seeing it for themselves as well. It truly is where the powerful change-making process comes from. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone who's joined, and thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for the panel.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.